Hi, Dr. Atchison here, and we're talking about Chapter 1. We're on our third lecture for Chapter 1, and we're going to be discussing research ethics specific to psychology. So in psychology, we have two kind of main groups of subjects we use in our research. We do research with animals and we do research with humans. And when doing both of those, there's research ethics that apply to both animal subjects and human subjects. And they're slightly different, but they're all about protecting those individuals. So in studying animals, there's been a lot of movements and protests against the use of animals in psychological, biological, and medical research. This is still an ongoing debate among psychologists, among the society, among our culture. And is it right to place the well-being of humans above that of other animals? So we're doing research on these animals because it's research that typically can't be done on humans for other ethical reasons. So the question is, are humans more important than animals? And that's another ethical question. So these are not things that we all have answers for yet. Ethics is an ongoing and ever-changing and evolving and hopefully improving area. And so the question is, what safeguards should protect the well-being of animals in research? So we have different kind of governing bodies that look at how we care for animals. One of which is the British Psychological Society, and it says that the animals be housed under reasonably natural living conditions. So this would be not putting them in really isolated caves. They also say that social animals need to be provided with companions. You and I know that being lonely is no fun, and our animal brothers and sisters are the same. And so the British Psychological Society says that these social animals really have to be provided with companions. The American Psychological Association, which is what researchers here at Georgia State would be under, require the researchers to ensure comfort, health, and humane treatment of animals, and they have to minimize infection, illness, and pain. And there are governing bodies that make sure that this stuff is happening. So in research that's conducted with psychologists, we look at animals to understand how different species learn, think, and behave. And we do these things primarily to learn about people. We also, in medical research, use animal research to help develop treatments for human diseases. So most medications, pretty much all medications, have been previously tested on animal models before they go into human subject testing. And so animal research is a really important part of our pharmaceutical research in developing these treatments for human diseases. Now, when researching human subjects, the APA and the BPS ethics codes still apply to research with human subjects as well. And they urge researchers to obtain informed consent. So if you've ever participated in any kind of research study, they give you a form to sign. And that is informed consent. A lot of times they'll read this to you as well and kind of talk about what's going to happen and what's in it. And this is informing you about the research so that you can properly consent to be a participant in it. Now, you have to be able to sign an informed consent form. You have to be 18. But prior to 18, you can't legally sign informed consent. You can't provide informed consent. Now, you can assent to research or dissent from research, but your legal guardian, a parent, would have to provide informed consent on your behalf. Also, these governing bodies protect participants from out of the ordinary harm and discomfort. So we really are concerned about causing no harm in our human subjects or no discomfort. And I've got a funny story. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. And the other thing that's really important is that keeping the information about individual participants confidential. When I was in graduate school, we had to keep the actual information on our infant participants in a separate locked cabinet opposed to their actual research data. So they were not allowed to be connected in really any way outside of, there was one sheet in this lock cabinet that had the numbers and the names linked together, so that we could go back and get demographic information on these individuals if we needed to. But again, it was under lock and key. Only the faculty research advisor and the graduate research students had access to the key. So that confidentiality is really important. And then fully debrief participants about what the research study is. So sometimes we do studies and we can't tell you exactly what we're doing before you sign and consent to the study. And so in that case, after the study is done, you'll have to debrief participants about what's going on. In this research ethics with humans, these American psychological and British psychological governing bodies got this research, came to these things out of various different documents, including the Belmont Report and things like that. And these say that we need to, one, have a respect for persons, that people are autonomous creatures. So we are all individuals, and we need to have respect for each individual in the same way that we have respect for ourselves. And that we would not do anything to each individual that we would not have done to ourselves. And those with diminished autonomy deserve extra protection. So that would be anyone, that's why we can't have informed consent signed by anyone who's under 18, is because they're considered diminished autonomy because they have a legal guardian. So they are not an individual in charge of themselves yet, and so they're going to deserve extra protection. So when I did my infant research, there was a lot of extra hoops we had to go through to make sure that we had respect for our infant participants, that we were being respectful of their autonomy, even though they weren't able to provide informed consent. Now, if you've ever been with a baby and a baby doesn't want to do something, there's definitely assent versus dissent. I was many a baby that cried that did not want to participate in the study, and we respected that. Because while they couldn't provide informed consent, they could provide assent or dissent. The other governing principle that's used by these organizations is justice. And who ought to receive the benefits and bear the burdens of research. And this is one of the ones that I feel that research has struggled the most with, and that we're continuing to struggle with, as we go on. So who gets the benefits of this research and who bears the burdens? The way we really approach this now is we select participants fairly. So in the past, tons of research was, and this is luckily in the distant past, was done on minorities, was done on special populations that were in prison, and that's going to have diminished autonomy, that aren't going to be able to protect mental hospitals, things like that. People were being subjected to research that they did not have informed consent to. Now we have these governing rules that cause us to select our participants fairly. And we try and have the most demographically, the most diverse sample that we can have, because that gives us more general truths about whatever research we're looking at. If we're looking at very special population, especially a special population that has diminished autonomy, that's not going to give us general truths. So we need to be fair in our selection of subjects so that the burdens of research are being bared fairly across human participants, and that the benefits of those research are being shared broadly across all demographics as well. The third one we look at is the idea that we're doing no harm. That's our first goal. We need to secure a participant's well-being. We need to maximize the benefits of the research and minimize the risks. And they take this very, very seriously. So when I was doing my infant work, I first needed to have participants, adult participants, look at these videos of people speaking in infant-directed speech and rate them. So they just had to watch a whole bunch of these videos of women talking to babies and say kind of what kind of emotion, what kind of information that this was trying to convey. Were they trying to comfort the infant? Were they trying to tell the infant that they did a good job? So it really was a straightforward study. We submitted the risk-benefit assessment to the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board that at every institution that says, yes, you can do this research, or no, you can't do this research. And we submitted it, and it got bounced, and it got sent back to us. And we were like, what? I mean, this is a very straightforward study. I'm not sure what we're having a problem here with the risk-benefit assessment. And they bounced it back to us because we had not listed a risk of this research as getting bored watching these videos. And so they want you to be very, very explicit in any risks, including boredom, so that the participant can really make an informed decision on whether or not to participate in this research or not. And so this risk-benefit assessment is something they take really, really seriously, even to include boredom. So the way that we make sure that these ethics are being maintained is, again, we have these ethical principles of psychologists and code of conduct that are put out by our different kind of overarching bodies. We have these institutional review boards, the IRB, at each research institution. And there's a similar board for research with animals as well, but mostly we're going to talk about human research in this course, so I'm going to mostly talk about the ethics for humans in this course. And so we have this board, again, that looks over this. And this is researchers from across different areas that do research with humans, so that we have peers that are looking at this, and people that are looking at it kind of from the outside to make sure that we're being fair to participants in these risk-benefit assessments. Informed consent, again, is that important piece. So the IRB says, yes, or you can do the research, or you can't do the research, but these are the things that you have to do. I mean, these are the things you have to tell the participant. And so that the participant knows ahead of time these risks and these benefits so that they can make an informed decision and consent to participate in that research. At the end, if there has been any kind of information that's been withheld from the participant, that debriefing is very, very important, and we have to let the participant know what has happened in that study. And that maintaining confidentiality, again, is a very, very important piece of this. Now, as I said, this ethical field is ever changing, and it really has been built on a product of our research history. And unfortunately, a lot of it has come out of where we've learned from our mistakes. I talked about a couple of the studies, the fields of study that have been really terrible. There are other ones, obviously the Tuskegee experiment with syphilis in the medical field, absolutely horrible, where they selected poor Black individuals and injected them with syphilis to see what happened. And there's some really poignant National Archive photos on that are linked on iCollege if you're interested in that. Things like the Little Albert study, the Stanford Prison study, and the Milgram study will all talk about from a psychological perspective of where we've crossed ethical lines there. And ethical practices are continually being discussed and refined for a greater respect for animals and persons. So I recently read a book called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and it talked about at the end the ethics of tissue and cell research and how the individual is involved in that and the respect for that. So it's an ongoing conversation that we as researchers continually have to improve ourselves and do better. Thanks so much. See you in class.